So we've got a couple questions coming in, and we're going to try and bite off as many of these as we can here in the next 10 minutes. First question up is, and this is actually a great one. I'm not sure it has a perfect answer, but it's what percentage of construction is performed under IPD versus design bid build? And I think even, Raymond, maybe the way to answer that, I mean, could you start with a quick definition of IPD, because that is a relatively new type of contracting vehicle?
Well, integrated project delivery is a new concept which ties the architect and the owner and the contractor into one contract together as a team, and it is relatively untested. I mean, it's being done on projects. Most of the projects I'm familiar with are larger corporations doing larger projects, and I think this is driven mostly by the architects. But in general, integrated project delivery is simply all of those methods, such as design build, CM at risk, where you are integrating the contractor with the architect to go through the pre-construction route and start the job. That's what we're talking about. Percentage-wise, wow, that's a hard one for me, and possibly I'll answer it in two ways. When I was a $500 million general construction company, 70% of my work was integrated project delivery methods, mostly CM at risk. 70% and 30% was hard bid. Now, I did that specifically. A lot of the larger contractors get away from hard bid completely, and they just want to negotiate. I wanted to keep my hard bid group alive because they had the sharpest pencils, and they were in the market continually, and that was the data that I was able to then provide my conceptual estimators on how to put numbers together. But that was probably 70-30. I would say today, in today's market, it's probably closer to 60% integrated project delivery to 40% hard bid. And that shifts from the private sector to the public sector. And you're going to see over a period of time the public sector starting to do more integrated project delivery methods on projects than the competitive bidding process. I believe in the hard bid process. I think it's great to have that tool in-house, but the industry is going in a different direction.
Yeah, I think, something that we've seen, and you broadened out the scope of the IPD. I was into everything that's non-design bid build, and when we've seen the IPD contracts where it's like you said, where you're actually contractually tying multiple contractors, engineers, and owners together, that's a really unique method. It requires a team that is used to working together. We're actually doing a panel on that tomorrow in Sacramento, so it won't be broadcast nationally or anything like that, but we're doing a panel on that. And actually one of the people on the panel is Will Lichtig, and he was an attorney at McDonough Holland and had worked on some of the original IPD contract language with Sutter Health. And, those are some contracts had 13-plus signatures on those contracts. When it goes well, it goes really, really well. When the team is truly open kimono and, you have a framing contractor that's willing to leave out sections of the building so that it's better for the mechanical contractor, and you have all parties truly working together, it's kind of magical. If everybody goes in and they're really trying to protect themselves, it's not as magical. But those really have to be forced by the large owners, and kind of in my personal experience, those have to be forced by the large owners. And I think that we will see that play out a lot more. We'll see a lot more of those projects in the future, but it's going to require different systems, different ways of thinking, different ways of collaborating together. Next question up. We're a $50 million a year general contractor and aren't doing any significant pre-construction services today. What would you recommend as our first step?
Well, I would clearly recommend the first step to be go on the search, and it may take a while for a conceptual estimator. When I first got in the business, it was about the same size I was, $40, $50 million firm. And I went on a search, and for what reason I can't remember, but I interviewed on the phone probably 25 architects and would say to them, who's the best conceptual estimator you've ever worked with? And one name kept surfacing, and then I went out and I hired him. And I would say that once I hired him, I had to train him. Yes, he had the abilities and he could do conceptual estimating, but I had to train him into the method and the format that I wanted it done in. So it's not just hiring that guy and letting him go. You've got to manage him and train him to make sure what he's producing is what you can communicate with an owner and an architect by. That's the number one step. Without that conceptual estimator, you do not do pre-construction services. You do estimating services.
Fantastic. You partway answered the next question with that, and I know right now talent is just challenging. We're spending about half of our time with clients right now just working through talent issues. So I know there's no magic bullet to this next question, but I got to ask it anyways because it's being asked. Is how do I go about finding that conceptual estimator in today's market? What do I look for? Where what are my recruiting methods? Kind of that full scope.
Well, the first thing is you've just got to get articulated exactly what it is you expect them to do and what their job description is. You can't allow the conceptual guy that you're looking for to tell you how to do it. You need to know what you're looking for to begin with. I think you recruit them probably more so from other companies than anywhere else. You have to find that guy and you have to recruit him and you have to pay him well and you have to give him good incentives because a lot's on the line for the type of projects you're after, and he's got to be sharp as a tack. I can tell you that when I would interview conceptual estimators, I'm not going to go into all that I would do, but one of the things I would always do is give them a schematic set of drawings and give them a day and say, I'd like you to come back and give me kind of your thought process on this and maybe a quick conceptual number on it and tell me how you went through that process. I would ask them, the easy one to ask is, because most general contractors don't know boo about MEP, is to ask that conceptual guy, well, how do you get your prices on mechanical, electrical, plumbing? And 9 out of 10 of them will say, well, I call this up. And that immediately tells you they're not a conceptual estimator. And that one guy will stand out and say, well, I have a database of information on cost, and I use that, and I figure labor rates, and I figure it. It may not be to the fine detail that a mechanical guy would do, but I do that myself. And then you know you're on the right track with the guy you're trying to find.
All right, that's perfect. Now, I've got one here, and I swear I didn't throw this one in myself. As an electrical subcontractor, what deliverables do you recommend, or what's needed at the interview stage in order to win? Are there, you talked a lot earlier about, kind of the bigger picture that they need to have that kind of estimating cost database, that conceptual estimator. What are the specific deliverables that the electrical sub should be looking at and be prepared for?
In terms of deliverables that he should give the general contractor?
Yeah, and as far as participating in that process at the pre-construction stage for the interview stage.
Well, for the interview stage, what that general contractor is wanting, and he's kind of in the lead because he's being interviewed, and he brings in his electrical subcontractor, he's going to give a brief overview of what he is. What he and the architect have done and their subconsultants have done in a general form of the mechanical system or electrical system that they're using in the project. The subcontractor's biggest value at that point is to share with the owner the pros and cons of the system that's been selected, what other systems were considered, and what the cost difference between those systems are. If he can advise the owner of areas where he can find cost-cutting measures without cutting the quality of the project because he knows specific vendors of materials and equipment, he gets into the details. And he needs to not just walk into that meeting cold. He needs to go to the contractor's office. If you're a contractor and you're really doing this type of work, you practice your presentations, several days to get your presentation, not slick, but good. And you need to participate in those practice sessions so that you don't get your electrical sub to, talk for 2 hours on, a widget. So he needs to practice with the contractor, and he needs to start to learn how to complement the contractor and the architect during this process by adding a little more detail into what they've designed.
Excellent. Last question, and then we'll call it a wrap. How valuable is scheduling in the pre-construction services? And I think the question is framed around the overall project schedule and working through not just the cost but the scheduling aspect of it.
Yeah, it is a critical issue, especially for the owner. And I'll give you my quick. It's critically important in any project, scheduling and sequencing as much as scheduling. How are you going to sequence this project? Where are you going to start first? How is the flow to this project going to happen so that it meets the schedule? So no different than if you were just hard bidding a project, you would put together your CPM schedule, know the critical path of the project, you'd know it inside out because you can't go over because you have limited general conditions. When it comes to the owner side, I've seen so many contractors make a presentation and put up their CPM schedule. Well, they might as well put up something in Latin because no owner understands any of it. So there are a billion ways to communicate schedule to the owner, but it's got to be in milestones, simply milestones. He's going to want to know when the slab gets put on the ground. He's going to want to know when the steel is topped out. He's going to want to know when the finishes go on. He's going to want to know when it opens. He's going to want to know the important milestone dates, and they have to be good because that's what the owner's going to be looking at. He's not going to go crazy over a week slippage on a concrete pour someplace, but he's going to go crazy if his overall schedule is going to go over. So he wants to know those milestones, and he needs to be able to track those milestones with you throughout the construction of the project. So in pre-construction, that's where you ought to start it, right there. And in your checklist to your owner, you might have to have on your list, we can do this, but it'll cost you 2 more weeks in the final end of the project. He might decide not to do that change because he can't afford that 2 weeks. I used to do a lot of video presentations and have an architect do, BIM's a great tool, but in the early conceptual stage, BIM doesn't work real well because you don't have enough drawings to create the BIM document that you would like to have to be able to, work on the conflicts of the pipe and the steel and so forth. But I would use a lot of video animation of the building actually coming up, and when it would be topped out, there would be a date on the screen, and the owner would see that, and boy, that made sense to him. The CPM chart made no sense to him.
I think that's great advice on the scheduling, and I know that I've failed at that a couple times because I'm used to a general contractor asking me about a schedule item, and there's a lot of detail when it comes to running a schedule. And then I've taken some of that same level of attention to detail that I thought I was doing good at and presented that to a project owner where we happen to be part of that pre-con team. And you're right. You see the eyes glaze over, and you know that you started to lose the battle pretty quickly. So I think that's great advice. Well, anyways, I hope everybody got some value out of today. If there's any questions, obviously follow up afterwards with either Raymond or myself or both of us. Our emails are here on the screen. And again, hope everybody got some good value out of it. Hope you can keep your teams behind for a little bit and discuss things, figure out how to go make your companies better. And we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.